Without further ado, Rosemary Jackson and Jay.
Thank you. Oh, you keep that. That's for you. Well, we're going to make this very casual. Please feel free to order your dinners if you would like, and get up and go to the bar in the back when you need to. It won't bother us at all. We're just going to have a conversation, as you do almost every month, about the subject matter of music, which is giant and large and quite amazing. Music is an international language. You do not need to learn it. You are born with the ability to discern it. In any matter and in any genre, music is something that stimulates the minds and the growth of babies within the womb and their growth through their academic careers. Music is something that heals those that are sick and soothes those that are at the very end of their lives. Music, it can be appreciated more and more through diligent study for those who are scholars, through those who, again, discern their likes and then their dislikes. Music is extraordinarily subjective to how you were raised, subjective to what your parents played in your houses as you grew up, subjective to certain music appreciation classes that you might have had in college, and then ultimately subjective to what you spend your entertainment dollars on. Springfield is a joyous place for its musical history. It is also a place that has a multitude of unusual musical styles. And in the Ozarks specifically, we have our own subsection of music that is known around the world with the storytelling through some of the, well, if you want to say back hills music that was played before a lot of those folks could read or write, and many of them didn't through their lives, but what they were able to do is tell their family histories through the music that they had at house parties and at hootenannies that still go on to this day. And I wonder how many of you out there have ventured off the beaten path in the Ozarks to see a Saturday night hillbilly hootenanny at Ava or Sparta or Spokane, I never remember. Spokane, I think, right? Yeah, Washington's over there. Any of you ever experienced that? Oh, a few. I thought there'd be more hands going up. They still exist to this day, and you can find it in the News Leader and other places if you want to go out and see some really great jam sessions where some of the old timers will still get up and clog for you and teach you to clog if you want. That's just one source of music that we have. Springfield is also a community that supports the arts. And is doing better and better all the time. We're a smaller community, but we do have an opera company, we have a theater company, we have a ballet company, we have a symphony orchestra, a long-time symphony orchestra. You look at the years that Springfield Symphony has been part of our history, it far puts some of the larger metropolises and newer metropolises to shame as far as the years that they are there. And then, of course, Springfield is known for its live music scene at the clubs and at the bars that go on every single night of the week and on the weekends. Again, get out, stretch yourselves, and find something new. At Lindbergh's, the oldest bar in Springfield down on Commercial Street. I've seen quite a bit there recently and had a terrific time, but it exists all over with whatever you are into. Ballroom dancing is another aspect of that. Well, Rosemary and I are very happy to be with you today, and this is a first for me. It's kind of odd when they ask me to interview her, and I said, do you want me to interview my mother? I already know all these stories, but this is a really special moment for me, and an opportunity to be asking her some questions and delving deeper into her musical career. I have known her all my life, and I have my career solely to as ode to my mother. I am an opera stage director. I have directed all over the United States and in Asia and in Europe. But I grew up here in Springfield. I was a graduate of Kickapoo High School. I went on to do my music undergrad at William Jewell College outside of Kansas City. And then I did my master's degree at Northwestern University outside of Chicago. And while I was there, I was an opera performance major, but I also double majored in the drama theater department in stage direction. And once I found out that I could have overarching control over the whole show, on me, I liked that power play, and so I put the two together, and I've been directing opera for 25 years. Had the great and grand pleasure of being the Masters of Ceremonies at the recent Springfield Regional Opera 40th Anniversary Gala for them, and that was a true special event on a very high level of expertise. And I'm here. I'll be speaking about the opera a little bit later. The 3 years a gentleman has been at the helm of the opera. His name is Michael Spires. He is a Mansfield born and bred boy that is now a world famous and world renowned opera singer. He is in demand at the major opera houses of our country around the world, such as Chicago Lyric Opera, Covent Garden in London, La Scala in Milan, Italy, and he will be making his Metropolitan Opera debut in New York this late January in a role that only he can sing around the world, because it is that obscure and that difficult for a tenor. So I expect, and I will be there, and I expect him to make a grand splash, because ultimately that is the paramount for any opera singer, is to be able to sing on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. So that's just a little bit, and it shouldn't have been about me, sorry. I'm quite long-winded. I'd like to start by playing, there was no piano here tonight, and so Rosemary didn't have the opportunity to sing for you this evening, but so that you can get in your ear a little bit about the voice that she beautifully possesses, and as we speak, I'm going to play a very short clip of hers. This is from an album that my mother recorded while we were living in Detroit, Michigan, the area there, in the 70s. And this was 73 or 4, I believe, an album that she made of sacred songs that were based on a lot on folk tunes and folk songs. She had a marvelous arranger and accompanist in Michigan. His name is Al Youngton, if I'm correct, and he wrote all the arrangements to these songs. This one that many of you will know is an old folk song called "His Eye is on the Sparrow," and it has been sung in every genre that I can imagine. I've heard it jazz, I've heard it in folk, I've heard it certainly in a more classical nature. So I will just, if you'll indulge us for just a moment, I'll play a little clip of this. And sorry, this is not very technical. I'm going to put it into the mic here.
Whenever I am tempted, whenever clouds arise, when song gives place to sighing, and hope within me dies, I draw the closer to him, from care he sets me free. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know he cares for me. His eye is on the sparrow,
Yeah. It's nice, too, that music can continue through the decades and through the generations because we have new musicians coming up all the time, composers, who can take older songs, reinvent them, and then make them live for a new and different generation, and I hope that that continues. I'm just going to read you a little bit about Rosemary and her some of her accomplishments that are here, if you would allow me, please. Rosemary has been speaking the gospel of opera, especially in the Midwest, for over 60 years. Rosemary was the very first opera diva in the history of Springfield Regional Opera when she sang the role of Mimi in Puccini's La Bohème in the inaugural production of La Bohème in the summer of 1979. During her singing career, Rosemary performed with various opera companies and symphony orchestras throughout the United States and Central America, with favorite roles being Madama Butterfly, Adina in The Elixir of Love, Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, and a thrilling highlight was being awarded as grand finalist in the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions in 1962, singing with the famed Met Orchestra on the stage of the Old Met, which I will tell you, the Old Met used to sit on where Madison Square Garden is today in New York City. And their final season was the 1964-65 season, and then the Met moved uptown to the Upper West Side into Lincoln Center, where it remains today. Their gala was with Leontine Price in 1966. Samuel Barber's modern opera, Anthony and Cleopatra, which was a total flop. So she sang on that stage of the Old Met, and she was under the guidance of a very famous European impresario named Rudolph Bing. Rudolph ran the Metropolitan Opera with an iron fist. That same year, she was also the winner of the American Opera auditions in Chicago, Illinois. Upon relocating to Springfield from Detroit in 1976, Rosemary became one of the most respected voice teachers in her decades-long career as an educator. She founded the Drury Opera Theater, which produced over 30 operas, giving countless student vocalists, guest artists, and community singers the opportunity to experience the wonderful world of opera. Many of the, she recently retired as Professor Emeritus from Drury University after nearly 43 years. Rosemary has been a true champion of opera as a lyric soprano, a longtime Springfield Regional Opera board member, an inspiring mentor and supportive teacher to many, many singers who have gone on to major careers, including the aforementioned Michael Spires, his wife Tara Spires, and Sean Spires. That entire musical family, those three were under Rosemary's tutelage at one time, and she's awfully proud of them, I know. Just recently, the opera, at their 40th gala, awarded Rosemary with a wonderful award for her Lifetime Achievement Award for her work as an advocate in the proliferation of the art of opera in Springfield and the regional area surrounding us. The award, if you haven't seen, is over at the table here to your left, and several production pictures. We scrounged around and got as many there as possible, but it was a really lovely award and a lovely moment that I know she's very proud of. So with that being said, let's delve into this wonderful wild world of opera in a way. Opera is an art form of the highest measure because not only does it obviously deal with music and singing, but it also is drama and theater, as well as literature and poetry. So, and many times there'll be ballet within the opera as well. So you put all of that together in a very stunning visual sense with sets and lights and wigs and makeup and all. It encompasses almost, and the visual arts because of the sets, everything that you could imagine. So, Rosemary, good evening.
Good evening, Jay.
You'll need to use your microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can
A singer doesn't usually use a microphone. Opera singer, though.
see if that's on.
Hello there. Can you hear me? Is there a button?
Here, I'll push.
Okay. A soprano can usually get along
Try.
without a mic, but I'm here. Okay, yeah.
No, I don't think that's on.
Not on yet?
Hello, hello.
Eat it?
Here we go. Why don't you
Well,
use
honey,
this?
what? I don't know. Is this all right?
Yeah,
You hear me now?
that's a better one. Hold it close.
Okay.
So,
What was your question, Jay?
I didn't give a question yet,
Oh.
but my first question to you, Rosemary, is where were you born?
You want to know that?
Yes, please.
Haven't I told you? My dad was a doctor, and he was a doctor in Buffalo, Missouri, and I was born in the Springfield Baptist Hospital down the road here, a little piece. And when I was about 7, he said, I want to move to Lebanon, Missouri, where there is a hospital. And I lived in Lebanon from the age of 7 on, and so this is my territory.
It is. Growing up, what musical styles were played in your home?
Oh, musical style.
Did you listen to any popular music of that day, or your parents?
No. We did classical music and sang hymns, and, we didn't have television or anything like that. But that's what we did. It was all live. No records or anything like that.
You didn't listen to records.
No.
Now, your grandparents, they emigrated to America from Italy, northern Italy. You had made mention that you would go to visit them on the farm in Monette, Missouri, and your grandfather had a prized Victrola.
True.
And did he listen to opera?
Yes, Grandpa did. Opera was important, my grandpa lived where Mother was born, on the line between France and Italy, and they combined it and did a lot of opera there. So he knew it.
Yes, he went to university in Turin, Italy, and probably, I'm thinking, I don't know this for sure, that he went to many opera at the famed opera company, opera house there in Torino.
Everybody did in those
yes.
days. They all did.
So your parents, did they expose you to art and to music?
Probably because I had an older brother and a sister that were very active, 8 and 12 years older than me. And so my sister accompanied every solo that ever was in Buffalo, Missouri High School. And Doug went on into music too. So I guess we took after Grandpa. I don't know.
Yes. Your mother, you said that your mother did not really teach you how to cook or how to sew.
No, she didn't want to piddle around with me. She said, go practice. And that's what I did. I'm not a cook. Still not.
I can somewhat attest to that growing up. But boy, she practiced and was always at the piano in her early life. And I'd rather hear that any day than have a homemade meal, so that's awesome. Your older sister, she was musical, your brother was musical. She was really your first teacher, wasn't she?
Well, probably,
Unofficial teacher.
Right. I mean, I wanted to be like her all the time.
You did. But she would also force you to sit on the piano and sing for her.
Well, some, yeah. Some,
Like a little grinding monkey is what
Probably.
I think of that.
But I enjoyed it.
Now let's come to a question that I'd ask anybody who's been to an opera. What was your first opera?
My first opera?
The first opera that you saw as a child?
Jay, I can't remember. There are so many. I can't remember.
But your
the
very
first.
first one, your father would take you on
When we went-
vacations
Well,
to
when we,
major cities around the country in the summers.
that's when we'd see them, but I don't recall the titles and so on. But when you're traveling and you go to a city and they have a lovely opera house and all, you go.
And if I remember, you told me Carmen,
I did see Carmen.
and it changed your world.
Well, it was exciting.
Well, it was exciting, wasn't it? Now, what was your very first performance as a child? Very first time you were on stage.
Ooh, Jay. We lived in Joplin, Missouri at that time. And
No, earlier.
even earlier than that?
With your mother at church.
Oh, I did a lot of church singing, yes. Uh-huh. Standing on the Promises?
And the poem?
I don't know. What poem? Oh, Rosemary, Are You Washed? Oh,
Tell them.
that was an old poem. That was my first production that I was ever in that I gave. So
At church.
at church, there were no TVs then.
And was it a disaster?
I don't know. The little boy that was sitting in front of us on the pew turned around and stuck his tongue out at me, and I thought it was no good. So that's all I know.
Yes. She ran off the stage into her mother's lap, where she stayed for the rest of the show. She was 5 years old in Lebanon, Missouri, at First Baptist Church there. So did you suffer from stage fright from that first time?
I don't know, Jay.
Did you ever have nerves?
Oh, yeah, don't we all? We have nerves.
Yes.
You learn how to do, as a performer, you learn how to tuck them in and keep going and doing what you're supposed to do. But you're always a little bit nervous. I think even some of our well-known performers today will say, yeah, I was nervous when I performed last night, or, that sort of thing. So it comes and goes.
Well, nerves for any performer is something that is natural and is good. If you don't have nerves, you're not in a zone. The thing is, as you do it more and more and you become a professional, you know how to take those nerves, focus it into your performance, and actually go into a character and be more believable, use it as an energy, because being on stage is a true energy suck. It sucks energy out of those performers being in a big theater with hundreds, if not thousands, of performers out there. A lot of times it's nice when we get response from an audience and energy, then we can use that ourselves. But otherwise you go internally, and nerves are the best way to do that. And as a teacher myself, I use that as a tool and as, if you want to call it, a crutch for performers and singers, not to be afraid of their anxiety or nerves. But if it's really bad, there are beta blockers for that, and a lot of performers do take beta blockers. You never had to do that, though.
Never.
So in Lebanon, Missouri, you grew up there, and can you tell us a little bit about who your first mentors, your first teachers were in Lebanon? Your first piano teacher?
I don't know if our audience would recognize them at this point. Lydia Lovin was my piano teacher. I don't know if anyone knows Lydia. Knew Lydia. She's passed. While I was there, Meredith Rich was teaching there, and she came here to Springfield and taught Ms. Rich. But those are a long time ago. Ms. Bradshaw was my piano teacher. Her dad, or her son, was Bradshaw, that we all know.
The governor?
Uh-huh. And I've had so many through the years.
No, but the reason I say this is it's important for us to tell of who our mentors are in life and to keep those memories going. Each and every one of us in the room have somebody along the way that guided them, that supported them, that were cheerleaders for them. And very rarely, once we get into our own careers, do we have the opportunity even to speak their names. And I give that to you. Every performer has somebody that touched them, that reached them.
That's true.
And you were a piano player, and you were known as a piano player most of your young life. Your voice did not come or was not discovered or developed until much later on. Tell us about Lebanon High School.
Ms. Rich was the teacher there, Meredith Bradley Rich. And so I was accompanying. I accompanied all the way through junior high and then high school and so on.
Glee clubs.
The glee clubs and all. And when I was a senior then, doing the accompanying and all, I went to Mrs. Rich and I said, Miss Rich, could I sing a solo at the competition? And she looked at me so surprised she couldn't believe it. But that was when I began, when I was a senior in high school and did a solo. I was an oboe player, and so that was the year I made a 1 in oboe state and a 1 in voice and a 1 in piano at the Missouri State, finalists that period.
Yes.
So, long time ago.
And you also marched in the marching band, but as many of you know, you cannot play an oboe and march at the same time.
I wanted to.
What did you do? Yeah, what did you do? What did you play?
Well, I played the, oh, now you've got me here, where you...
Glockenspiel, the bells.
I played the bells when I marched.
Well, there's your piano coming back.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. But it was fun, all those years, and you all shared those too, I'm sure. Marching bands, they were fun.
I think it's interesting. Here is a person quite musical, but because she was so proficient in piano, no one ever knew she had a voice, and maybe she didn't. That's the other thing. Quite interesting.
Might be.
Yeah, I mean, at that age, maybe it wasn't anything extraordinarily interesting, but here your choir teacher knew you as a pianist, and obviously relied very heavily upon you. But it wasn't until you take a moment to say, "Hey, I'd like to try this. Can I give it a chance?" That's why with our kids and with our grandkids, it's important. Let them try everything that they can, and as long as they've tried it, they can make their decision on whether they want to continue that, whether it's sports or music or theater or debate, whatever they want to do. You never know when that little pianist turns out to be an opera singer on the stage. So you went from Lebanon, Missouri, and where did you go to university, college, in the early 50s?
I started at William Jewell College, and I was just going to go 2 years, and my sister knew I wanted to go on to Northwestern University, up in Illinois. And I got settled at William Jewell and had a husband, stayed on there. And that was where your dad was a football player. So I never went on to Northwestern, but Jay did.
I finished your destiny, I
Yes,
guess,
you did. You
yeah.
did.
Do you have your professor? You had 2 professors, the Grolsches.
Oh, Dr. Grosch.
Grosch.
Yes, the
How did they change your life?
by opera. You didn't have opera in college in those days. Opera was down the road, several years.
Well, very few universities had a full opera program,
No,
or
they did
especially
not at that time.
small colleges. Yes.
And Dr. Grosch did, and that's how I got involved with it, and began singing opera in college. And now we teach opera in college, but not in those days at all.
Moving from a relatively small town of Lebanon up to the greater Kansas City area, did that also open up the world of classical music, of art in general? Did you, as a college student, go to the symphony there, did the Met, at the time the Met was doing traveling opera all around the country, and that's where most people of that era were able to see opera for the first time. Did you take advantage of that?
Oh, certainly. We were right there in Kansas City and all. And while I was still a student at William Jewell, I auditioned for Starlight Theater that was just beginning. That was the very beginning of Starlight Theater in those days. And enjoyed, doing musical theater and meeting all those older, wonderful people, names that are long gone now. But Starlight Theater was new.
Yeah, for those of you, I mean, you probably do know of Starlight. It's lost its popularity in waning years, but it was very similar to the St. Louis Muni. And it was a summer stock program. It was only produced in the summer in Kansas City, their very large Swope Park out south and east of downtown. And they would have an ensemble, which Rosemary was a young member of that ensemble. They had an ensemble of singers at that time and an ensemble of dancers, and neither the twain should meet. Now, today, with budgets as they are, a performer has to be at least dance proficient, I would say, if they're a singer, and if they are a wonderful dancer, they need to at least carry a tune in order to be hired in the Broadway shows and the musicals and the tours that go around. So, and then, did your parents support your decision to go into music and your degree in music, or did they also want you to gain another degree?
Well, a teaching degree is what they want me to do, to teach music and to teach it in schools, public schools and so on, which I did for a few years. So that was a catch for me if I had to do that, rather than going around and traveling with performers and so on, like Starlight Theater. So
Sure. And I will say that when I went on and got my degree, my parents both were very specific that I would also get a second degree in music education, which I never used, and was the bane of my existence for 2 years of statistics and all that other stuff that many of you know. So you then moved on, and there was an opera company that started in Kansas City. You were married to your husband, John, my late father, and he had a career and stayed in Kansas City area. So you were there. You were singing in the summers with Starlight Theater, and a new opera company came on board with Russell Patterson. Can you talk about that, please?
well, it was just a classical opera company that came in and began in the theaters there, and has existed through the years. They still have a wonderful opera company there in Kansas City. So I was at the beginning of that long ago. But
long ago. It was the late 1950s and early 1960s, and the head of the company there made a dictate which caused ripples all throughout the opera world, in that he decided that opera would only be sung at the Lyric Opera of Kansas City in English. Well, people, heads rolled, and traditionalists screamed, but it was very important for him to sing in the vernacular, especially in an area that didn't have a lot of opera. People in New York, they grew up with it. They grew up going to the opera, or their parents did, or they would listen to the Metropolitan Opera, Saturday opera broadcasts, which you could listen to here. And I know I grew up with my mom having me sit with her on Saturday afternoons, but lucky enough that she opened the score of whatever opera was being broadcast. That wasn't every week, but she would let me read through the score with her, and so I got a very unique education even before I left the home. It's still in existence, over 100 years old, the broadcasts, and now what they do is they also have simulcasts in the movie theaters, and I do believe Springfield still shows those Metropolitan Opera broadcasts on Saturday. Is it out at the one on East Battlefield? I can't remember. Oh, it's the Downtown Hollywood Theater. And for $20, which is a fraction of what you pay at the Metropolitan Opera, you sit in comfortable seats, and you can be like you're on the front row of the opera. It is broadcast with multiple cameras, 8 or 9, and they have interviews at intermission backstage with the artists. They take you through the set. It's a fascinating experience. And you're also seeing it live. It's going on at that very moment on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. And they have these broadcasts now that are so popular. They go throughout the world. People in Japan will be up in watching it at 2 or 3 in the morning because of the time change on that. It's been a very good boon for the opera in general. It hasn't been necessarily that terrific for the Metropolitan Opera because people have stopped buying season tickets at $225 or more a ticket at your highest levels, of course. You can always stand and watch a 3-hour opera for $25, but that's what kids like me did. But it's taken a bit of their sales away. So there was a trade-off that Gelb has done there. All right. So you stayed in Kansas City. You were singing. You were singing professionally. Starlight was your first professional gig, but you were also a teacher in junior high in Kansas City. You hadn't made a decision at that point to make opera as an opera singer your career. You were a teacher at that moment. You had your first child, my older brother Doug, who passed away last February, and he would be so very, very proud that Rosemary's here, and at the invitation of his very good friend Chris Albert, who's running the camera at the back. And so, Chris, thank you very much. I know Doug would be very happy for your invitation. Then, in 1962, the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions came, and it is an exhaustive search. Only American artists, born native to America, can sing in this. It's to promote American talent, and it has been around a long time, but it still goes on to this day. It's things have changed just a little bit. In earlier eras, you would immediately get a contract to sing a role at the Met, but in later years, they get money and they get to be part of the Metropolitan's opera school. So the singers have to work just a little bit harder in this day and age to make their careers go. But if you get a stamp of approval from the Metropolitan Opera, lots of doors then do open for you. So you were one of the winners there in 1962. Tell me, what was that week like that you spent in New York, and your husband John was with you?
Well, that's a long time ago, Jay. 1962. But it was exciting and all, and it was the Met and all, and we tried to, what would they do if they assigned me to, a contract and all. And so John, your daddy, went out and was interviewed there, and thinking we might move to New York and I'll just, keep singing there at the Met. And I was a finalist, but not the finalist. So we didn't have to decide on anything, but he kind of looked around to see if you wanted to live in New York City, but we didn't. And it was fun to come on back home too, but you meet folks and all, and it was exciting at that time, so.
So you were there and you were singing with the orchestra, with a conductor, a maestro on the stage. And so what happens is there's a district auditions in Missouri. Then you win that, you go to a regional audition, which are 5 to 7 around the country. And if you win that, then you're invited to sing with the orchestra and on the stage, and you're one of the finalists that are there. And they do consider those who become finalists and are invited by the Met to sing as winners of their program. Yes, there is a top winner that gets the contract for the Met or goes on to various other recitals and concert tours that are there. So you're singing at the Met, and your repertoire is all prepared out for you. It's what you have auditioned for. Rudolph Bing, again, I bring up that name, the impresario, the famous dude that was very stern and serious, was an advisor to Rosemary. And right before the finals, the big concert, which is open to the public, they buy tickets for it, and the Met is huge. I'm not quite sure how many of the old Met seated, but it was somewhere in the 3,000 to 3,500 seats. The current Met now is huge. It's the biggest opera company in the world, and it's at 4,400 seats, and that's about as large. There are a lot of European opera singers that won't sing at the Met because they feel that is too large, that pushes their voice too hard. As you need to remember, opera is an unamplified art form. So you're seated in the theater without microphones and with a 75-piece orchestra in a pit and singing over that. So when you get a behemoth like the Met, it does take some of your strongest vocal cords to be up there. And it's ruined many a voice too, those that have tried to push too much and too hard. It's a strenuous activity. You think of your vocal cords right here in your neck are like little filaments of a light bulb. They are so delicate, and they vibrate at such a high rate. Now you have some thicker cords that surround it, that protect it, and that you use when you sing at a lower frequency. But when you're singing really high at the top of your voice, those cords are just vibrating on you, and any tear or rip in them could be disastrous. So, I think of opera singers as sometimes being very crazy people. You will see them on your airline flights. They are the ones that aren't just wearing the mask like our Asian friends do. They have specific and special machines that they wear on their long flights, and they're flying all over the world all the time. And these are pressurized breathing machines that have canisters or something like that, putting fresh air because they don't want to breathe recycled air that goes through the planes. And when you have a voice and you're making your livelihood, and some of the tops are making anywhere from $10,000 a performance upwards of 25 and 50, and then if they're doing a big like the big tenors at the three tenors concerts, they're making $1 million a piece on that. If they get sick, have to cancel, well, they're not getting money, and they want money. They want that badly. So they will wear special protective things, and they look like freaks, but they're not concerned. Yes?
Why don't they allow amplification?
Well, it's not part of the tradition of opera. Opera is a very old art form. It goes back over 400 years now. And even before that, we have Greek theater that goes back to the time of the amphitheaters in Greece that are there. And so it has been the tradition that the voice has been developed and honed and trained over many years of study in order to be able to produce the sound that can wildly fill an auditorium without amplification. Now, I will say, as we move further away and into more modern times with technology, opera is starting to amplify at some points. Not everybody, certainly not everybody. And they will not tell you that they are doing that. If they have a particularly troublesome theater, such as the New York State Theater, renamed the Coke Theater, but that was the home of the New York City Opera in Lincoln Center, and it's still there. It's the home of the ballet company, if you've ever seen the Nutcracker in New York. That is a very problematic hall because it was built for the ballet company, not for a musical company, so the acoustics are horrendous there. I've worked there with the City Opera in the mid-2000s, and it was a problem because there are dead zones and dead spots. So they very secretly, hush-hush, had zones where they would microphone, and they'd have special sound guys and women that would lightly amplify it. And those of us who knew, and those of us who have an ear for that, could certainly tell. But for the most part, I think the general audiences actually enjoyed it, and they liked it. The one thing about opera singing, as opposed to any other kind of singing that uses this type of amplification, is that you can't quiet down the voice in order to become softer and allow the mic to do its work. I'm probably over speaking in this mic, actually, because I don't have a lot of use of a mic. But you give an opera singer a mic, or even put a mic within 5 feet of them, they're still going to sing with the power they would without the mic, and then it overshoots it, and you get a lot of feedback and fold back, and the moment that you hear that squeal in a theater, you got an audience that's pretty irate. So I don't see it becoming a true amplified art form on that.
Question back here.
Well, we're going to do questions here in just a moment, Chris. Yeah, awesome.
Use your mic.
Oh, I thought I was using it. All right. Well, then that same year, she was one of the winners of the Chicago opera auditions. And at that point, in those auditions, there were a lot of impresarios, a lot of managers is what I'm talking about, from Europe that were there, and contracts were offered for a European to come over and do year-long contracts in Europe, come over and do an audition tour, study through. Rosemary, why did you and your husband make the decision then not to go to Europe after those auditions?
That was back in the 60s. And, we were going to have a family and all, and I wanted to be in home around my...
Well, you already had a son.
Right, but I wanted to be home with the rest of them and all, and I didn't want us to live in Europe. And I at least that's what I think. It's been so long ago, but and we gave it some thought to see if I should do that. But I guess opera was not my main priority then, because I wanted to raise my family.
So we all in life have to make decisions sometimes in pathways. And I've asked many times from my mother, Mom, why didn't you do that? What could have happened there? The world could have been opened to you. And she's never had a regretful moment at that. She says that... Time
is running out.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But yes, hasn't had now you took that away from me, a regret on that. So I guess the case is, sorry, this has flustered me just a little bit. I do apologize for that. The case is we will never know, and you always would answer that is that you wouldn't be here. Had I done that, you wouldn't be here, because obviously life would be different and times would be different at that.
Never know.
Well, Mother, we're going to go through the rest of this in a very quick manner. You were at Drury College and then Drury University for 43 years, from 1976 to 2019. Just this year, she made a full retirement. She had retired from professorship in 2007, but she's maintained an adjunct studio until this year, and then made her full retirement. What has Drury University meant to you and your colleagues there?
Well, do you really want to know? I stayed there all those years and all, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed my students, and many of them keep in touch with me now, and they're out teaching, maybe some, and some are just doing other things that are not even connected to the voice and singing and all, but they had enjoyed there and singing and all. And I think music, as I get older and all, I wonder what it would be like if we didn't have music in our world, and we're all part of music. And it means a great deal to us. We have our all likes and dislikes of styles and so on, and there's so many that didn't used to be. It used to be all classic, and pretty much when I was growing up. So what I think is that we appreciate it, and we should keep it going in all directions. Even though we don't like some of the styles that are being done, the people that do have enjoyed them, and it's been important to them. So we should let them keep going, and we do our own thing. And church music's very important to our society too. And so I say, when I say, what would it have been like without music? and we have to appreciate it.
Weren't a lot of the theaters designed for non-microphone performances, especially in Europe and the early theaters? That was vaudeville never had microphones.
Oh, sure. No, in fact, all theaters, because the idea of amplification only came up in the turn of the last century. So all theaters had to be dealt with their acoustics. As I stated, they started in your big amphitheaters in ancient Greece and the Roman theaters that are there. In the Roman theaters, they would also utilize the idea of what are called vomitoriums. And these are in front of the stage that go like stadium seats. You've got little hallways that are there. Those were because between the acts, the Romans would they were gluttons, and they would fill themselves with food, heavy foods, and eat to the point that they would go in the theater into these voms. We call them voms, but vomitoriums, so that they could do their thing and go back and eat more through the show. So theaters have had, but also acoustically, it allowed the sound to go out the voms and back around to the stadium seating. So it was almost like stereo amplification way before that.
As far as the voice goes, I've read about I'll call it a drug, but it's a derivative of maybe a bark of some birch tree or something called guaifenicin. And I've read where old-time opera singers use this to strip the vocal cords and make them clearer. I was wondering if you knew anything about that, if you've ever used that or heard about it.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Okay. Take it to me. Yes, there is. I don't know the word as you used for the actual drug of that, but there are a couple different types. And I did know an old Italian conductor who always had them, and they tasted horrific. And they would have some sort of agent in them that would take away the phlegm and the fluid that can build up, especially singers who happen to have a dairy allergy and get extraordinarily phlegmy. They will still use that. A lot of them are tried and true, though, to the modern day Ricolas, if you know what the Ricola cough drop is, which again tastes horrific, but it will clear and cleanse their sound and their tone quality. Yeah.
Rosemary, we want to thank you for sharing your life with us tonight. It's wonderful to have you and Jay here.
Thanks for having
You bet.
us.
Just as a point of information, our good friend Mike Carley and I are performing next Sunday at the Springfield Community Theater, and I just found out it's totally sold out. So that's
great.
good. Okay, well, hope you have a wonderful evening. Be careful driving home. Good night.